This quarter, I hope when you see the title of the class, The Law of Moses, I hope that you have thoroughly heard about what I want to accomplish in this class. This class is not about learning the laws so that I can see a list of the things that God wants us to do, especially from the Law of Moses perspective. Rather, what we're trying to do is understand the character and the nature of God. What's he like through the laws that he's given? And so my main question through this quarter has been, what kind of people does God want us to be? That's really the goal of talking about these laws, to learn what kind of people we're supposed to be. And so we went through the different commandments, like as categories, as what would you call it? Like the don't murder class. That included the ideas of assault, and the don't commit adultery class included ideas about sexual immorality, generally speaking. Tried to do categories like that. So this last class is one that has to do, it's not something that I can specifically attach to any of the other 10 commandments, but I definitely wanted at least one spot for this class to talk about this concept throughout the Old Testament, which is God has said over and over and over again in various ways that he expects us to be people who take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. Or the way that I thought a lot about the title, like what will we call the title of this class? And I think caring for the weak is probably the best way that I can think of to talk about this class. So before I start on my list, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6. The thing says examples of God's expectations for us. I've got 6 categories of those examples that I want to talk about. But before we do, is there anything that you want to start us off with? Like when you imagine what you know about the Old Testament law, that we're supposed to be people who take care of those who cannot take care of themselves, what laws or what words or what ideas come to your mind in the Law of Moses as we talk about that subject? Start out with an open floor. Any conversation that you want to do. Yeah, Maria?
I mean, when you think about it, just how God talks about how we're created in his image. And so if you apply that, that's not, I'm not just the only one created in his image, or my sisters aren't the only one, but all of humankind. And when you view other people in that lens, and I know my mother, as a retired nurse, she used to say when she had really difficult patients that was one of the things she would always remind herself is Christ's love for us, and that they were, God created them too, and God loves them too.
Yeah.
And so when you have that perspective, I think it really changes how you handle people and how you treat others.
Yeah. And the words that you're talking about is, while all people may not be due respect, all humans are due a sense of dignity, human dignity. We're all made in the image of God. And so, yeah, good. I like that. Others, general, shotgun approach. We'll do 2. Dave and then.
Just 2 words, fatherless and the widows.
Perfect. Why do you think it? I mean, more. Give me more on that.
Because the fatherless need a father, and the widows need support.
Yeah. So it's not, this is our very first point. It's not that God is saying, these are the 2 people that you must take care of. He uses those people as an example of people who can't support and care for themselves. So he says, you help them. And they're illustrations and pictures. That's the very first thing I want to talk about. Jessica?
So when I think about the old law and caring for the weak, how remember that I brought you out of Egypt. I brought you out of slavery. Like, remember what I did for you? It's a lot like what Marina said.
Yeah.
Remember the care that God has already shown to us.
Mhm.
Let's show that same care to others.
Yes. And that's ultimately, I think that's probably my last point. I hope that we actually get there. And that is to say, okay, now that we've spent this time talking about taking care of those who cannot take care of themselves, the end of this class is, that's me. I'm the one who can't take care of my own soul, and God has taken care of me when I could not take care of myself. That's really the end of this class. So, yeah, Maria?
And that just made me think, when you think about the weak and you think about like who falls in that category, like I think of the two extremes, like you've got like, and I'm not trying to get political here, but you have literally the unborn, babies in their mother's womb, and then you have, let's say, the elderly, the older group, and those are like the bookends of life. And when you think about, a lot of times over like history, there's been, philosophers or whoever that'll say the way you see a society and the way they treat their weak or the most vulnerable says a lot. And if you see and you apply that to today and what's going on in a lot of nations today in terms of how they want to treat the unborn, how we want to treat, the elderly, or let's say people who maybe have a terminal illness or very, very sick and can't function, and so even though they may be only 40 years old, by all standards, because they can't function and really take care of themselves for whatever reason, they might as well be maybe 90 years old.
Yeah.
And you just see how a lot of these governments want to just literally exterminate them
Out with the old, in with the new. Let's not deal with that.
and just get rid of them because in their eyes, there's no value.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's do this. Would somebody please read Exodus 22 and verses 21 to 24 for me? Exodus 22, 21 to 24.
You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry. And my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless.
Yeah, yikes. I mean, it's one thing. To me, it's one thing to say, don't be mean. It's another thing to say, don't mistreat the widow, or I'm going to make your wife a widow. But that's this justice, this lex talionis that we've been seeing throughout the Old Testament, this system of God, like absolute fairness, and that's how God applies the fairness. In this verse, you have three categories of people: the sojourner, a traveler, somebody not established, somebody who doesn't have stuff. The idea is subsistence to survive. The widow and the fatherless. While we have this conversation, though, this is the thing that I was mentioning to Dave. Look at Leviticus 19 also, because I would like to just say that in this conversation, these categories of people, it's not like we're limited to who we don't mistreat. These are pictures of people who can't take care of themselves, so we step up and help. Leviticus 19 and verse 14 includes, like we could do this over and over again. Now we're going to expand this into people with disabilities, 2 disabilities specifically. You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear the Lord. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord. So, sojourners, fatherless, widows, deaf, blind. Let's just take this. Don't mistreat the disadvantaged, those who can't take care of themselves. God's law. And this is one of my pieces that what I really, really want to emphasize, what you read a second ago, God's not messing around. Like, the consequences are not, don't do this thing because if you do, you're a jerk, and who would do something like that? He puts some heavy consequences on. He expects us to be the kind of people who take care of people who can't take care of themselves. Anything you want to say about mistreating?
In 2014, I started work in Lafayette, and that's a place for disabled people to work. And I told my mom, I want to help people. Sorry, I'm emotional. But help people overcome their problems. Like, one person said, Ian, and I'm not trying to be mean, but Ian, I'm so retarded. I'm like, first of all, that's inappropriate talk. You shouldn't be saying that. You're not dumb. You might have a disability, but you could overcome that by saying, even though I have a disability, I'm gonna overcome my problem.
Yeah. I think your comment pushes me towards, this is probably not something that belongs in this class, but Maria, this is what I was thinking of whenever you were making your comment about, get out of the way, we have other stuff to do. This baby's going to be inconvenient for my life. Get out of the way, I got other stuff to do. Taking care of my elderly parents is inconvenient for my life. Get out of the way, we got other stuff to do. I never know how to say these things in a right way. But I wouldn't wish having a kid with disabilities on anybody, but also, especially in a congregation, just with statistics, we got a lot of babies coming, and there's things that happen. And the thing that I always want to say to people is, this is not the worst possible thing that can happen. And you can't imagine it, like when you're in the situation, it seems like the worst possible thing that can happen. And I wouldn't wish it on somebody. But it's not the worst possible thing that can happen, because there are things that you get to learn about life and people that you would not otherwise get to learn. You learn about a whole nother level of compassion, and we're going to walk slower as a family so everybody can walk together and all of this. And it's like, I think these passages are leading us towards, there's got to be a better way to say this, but the thing that runs through my head is, God doesn't want his people to be jerks. Don't be that way. Don't mistreat those who are disadvantaged. Let's push forward just a little bit. One example of mistreating is exploitation. I'm going to take advantage of. And I've tried to consolidate. Rather than run you all over the Bible, I gave you a bunch of different, I didn't give you, maybe a couple. Look at Deuteronomy 24. I think Deuteronomy 24 we can stay in this passage and take care of this point within one chapter. So let's just do this one little thing at a time. In talking about don't exploit, I love this chapter. I love the pictures, and please, this is the thing that I want. And I punch myself like, I wish that I was better at finding words to articulate feelings. But there's the words that are spoken in Deuteronomy 24, but what comes out of Deuteronomy 24 is more than don't hold collateral overnight. It's what kind of a person does God want us to be? We're learning about character and how to live. So Deuteronomy 24 and verse 6, I think this one doesn't really belong in this, but it's here in this chapter, so I thought we'd throw it in there anyway. No one shall take a mill or an upper millstone in pledge, for that would be taking a life in pledge. So the pledge that's being talked about here, some of your versions probably say guarantee. I think the word that we would use is collateral. So if I make you a loan, you're going to give me the title of your car, right? And if you don't repay the loan, then I get your car, sort of a thing. But in this passage, what's happening in this passage is, if I give you a loan and your car is the guarantee or the collateral, I don't take your car from you, because now you can't go to work to make money to pay the loan. That's the thing that's happening here. Like I think verse 6 is just be a reasonable human being, like use your brain. But if you push forward on some of these other things, verses 12 and 13, if he is a poor man, you shall not sleep in his pledge. So what if the collateral that you give me, the only thing that you have to offer me is your blanket? And I'm like, well, too bad for you. Looks like you're going to be cold at night. Verse 13, you shall restore to him the pledge as the sun sets, that he may sleep in his cloak and bless you, and it shall be righteousness for you before the Lord your God. Verses 17 and 18, you shall not pervert the justice due to the sojourner or to the fatherless, or take a widow's garment in pledge. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore, I commanded you to do this. So, what if you don't even have hardly anything to offer as a pledge? And the idea here is, don't take it. Don't take it from them. I think this is pointing us back to the concept of human dignity over and over again. Verses 14 and 15. Did we already do that one? No. 14 and 15, you shall not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the sojourners who are in your land within your towns. You shall give him his wages on the same day before the sun sets, for he is poor and counts on it, lest he cry against you to the Lord and you be guilty of sin. So I'm not going to hold your wages just because I can. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. You have no recourse. You have no power. I'll give you your pay whenever I feel like it, when it's time to give you your pay. And God says, no. If somebody has worked and you owe them money, just give them their money. This is human decency, is the picture that we're painting here. Exploitation, I think, is the main picture. There's other things in this section, though. Do I have 10 and 11? Oh, this is my favorite. I was reading this, I think, 2 weeks ago. I love this so much. 10 and 11. When you make your neighbor a loan of any sort, you shall not go into his house to collect his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you make the loan shall bring the pledge out to you. So I made a loan to Jake. Jake owes me whatever. I have his collateral, so it's mine now. And so it's like, I'm going to get what's mine. So I Sparta kick open his door, and I barge in, and I take it by force, because it's mine, after all. And God's like, no, that's not the way that we operate. You go to his house, you knock on his door, you ask him to bring it to you, you stand outside and wait for it, and then he willingly... But do you see, these are not procedure steps. This is the kind of people we're supposed to be. You see what I'm getting at? Anything you want to say? Can you do better with words than me on that? Can't be much harder. Oh, yeah, Dave.
I was thinking about this and how this is kind of one side of the coin, and this is how you should
Yeah, good. Caleb?
That's one thing that I was thinking where there's kind of like these parallel thoughts where if you're going to help somebody that you can't be rewarded from. Because if you get something in return for your help, then you receive your reward. But if you don't, then you'll be rewarded by God. And on the flip side of that, if you're going to harm somebody, don't harm somebody that doesn't have any recourse to recover from it, because then God is going to intervene.
Yeah.
And that's a scary idea. I think it's my favorite phrase. That's kind of threatful law. And like at the end of God saying something, he says, I am the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, don't leave it up to me, because I'll intervene if I have to.
That's not something that we want.
It's kind of like, it reminds me of God saying, wait till your dad gets home. You better start acting right now.
Yeah. Yeah, good. So I'm going to push forward here, Dave and Caleb. Being generous, helping those who maybe necessarily can't pay you back. One of the things, an entire category by itself, and we can stay in Deuteronomy 24 for this one, verses 19 to 22. Would somebody read that for us? Deuteronomy 24, 19 to 22.
When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheep in the field, you shall not go back and get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all your work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over them again. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather your grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterward. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this.
Okay, good. So provision for food. Don't mistreat, don't exploit, actively provide for, make provision for. Anything you want to say about that one? How about this one? Let's go to Leviticus 25. I could keep you closer. We could go to Deuteronomy 23, but I think Leviticus 25 is better on this one. I think I would like, this is going to be just a little longer. Can somebody read verses 35 to 44 for us? 35 to 44, please.
If your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself with you, you shall support him as though he were a stranger and a sojourner, and he shall live with you. Take no interest from him or profit, but fear your God, that your brother may live beside you. You shall not lend him your money at interest, nor give him your food for profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. If your brother becomes poor beside you and sells himself to you, you shall not make him serve as a slave. He shall be with you as a hired worker and as a sojourner. He shall serve with you until the year of the Jubilee. Then he shall go out from you, he and his children with him, and go back to his own clan and return to the possession of his fathers. For they are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. You shall not rule over him ruthlessly, but shall fear your God. As for your male and female slaves whom you may have, you may buy male and female slaves from among the nations that are around you.
Okay, so before I make my comments, what are your comments about this? What do you see in this text, lessons that you learn, principles?
I think it's interesting that with the whole charging your brother interest, there's a prohibition against that. But it's not an outright prohibition against charging interest. I would think it's a prohibition against charging your brother. I would assume another descendant of Abraham's, another Jew interest. Is that the way you read that?
That's the very first thing that I want to take from this too is, in a lot of these passages, there is a concept of don't mistreat the sojourner, don't exploit the sojourner, but there is a distinction between our people and not our people. And the concept is be extra good to our people. Or if you want to use New Testament language, especially to the household of faith. And so the idea here is, don't go out there and be a nasty person, but then the idea is, but you especially don't be a nasty person to our people. I mean, that's exactly the first point that I had too. I think that's right on the money. Because there is a distinction between your brother and not. You can't take your brother as a slave. But then he says in verse 24, but to those from the nations who are your slaves. And the idea is you can't charge your brother interest, but to those that you do charge interest. You know, it's like, yeah.
But what I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but what I see God saying is it's much more serious and much more, it's a heavier commitment than just don't be nasty to your people. It's take care
Yeah.
of your people. I mean, that requires a lot more than just a smile and saying something nice when you see them.
Yeah. So the idea would be like if you owe me money, and the Old Testament provision for that is to take a person as a slave to work off their debt, this law tells us, but don't treat them as a slave. Right? I mean, and it's, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was kind of related to that where it says, treat them as a hired man, and then even goes on to say, have him serve with you. I see more of like a side-by-side, this like partnership almost.
Yeah. There's other places, I don't remember what the passages are, but in this study, I didn't know this before this study, but in this study there's a provision in the law for how much it is, and I don't remember what it is, but I think you pay him a third of what you would have paid him, and then the other 2/3 are to pay off his debt. But you still are like, hey, you're working with me, so here you go. So I just think it's neat to see how the character and the nature of God is what we're learning about here. One of the things that I think we've seen this 5 times now. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I've tried to keep a count in my mind. The concept that we've seen, I'm not ready to talk about this just yet, but I want to throw it out to you. How many times have you seen the justification for the law is, for you were a slave in Egypt? Or in this one that we gave, it's the Lord gave you the land of Canaan. And so the driving point seems to be something like the golden rule. Hey, look at what God did for you. Don't go out and not do that for others, sort of a thing. Did you have something? No? A couple more because I really want to get to this last part. Everybody is to be included in worship. I won't read those, but in these passages, the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of Booths in Deuteronomy 16, it says we're going to celebrate the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of Booths, and it says even the fatherless and the widow and the sojourner. And it's like, if you don't have something to celebrate and worship God in this way, then we provide for them so that they can. And that reminds me of James chapter 2, that passage that I have up there on James chapter 2, which talks about a specific passage in the Bible that says, if somebody comes into your worship service and they're wearing shabby clothes, you don't treat the person with nice clothes better than the person with not nice clothes. That concept is, when we come to worship God, worship is for everybody across the board.
I'm under the impression that the sojourners are not necessarily people that are out in the future, but are people also included with them right now. Because of the passage of when they left Egypt, that they left with a mixed multitude.
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess I'm kind of soundboarding here with you. Is that what's being
So I would say
also
this.
taken into consideration?
Yeah, definitely not the people of the land, because they had to go. But yes, there was a mixed yeah. I was doing some reading since we've been doing Judges. Erica's doing the ladies, and I'm with the men and Judges, and I've been doing some reading on Othniel. And one of the things about Caleb and Othniel, the son of Jephunneh, is that they may not be, they're associated with the tribe of Judah, but they may not be descended from Judah. That's a wild conversation, but there's an example of somebody among us who is not our same genealogy. Yeah. Okay, this is the one that I really want to talk about. These are my favorites. I think they're all up there at one time. And the thing that I want to say before we even start reading these passages are, they all have to do with animals. And so there's that. Like, this is the kind of person that we're supposed to be. And I think you could even extend it to animals. Like, there's no reason to be a person who mistreats a living thing. There's just no reason for that. My mom, when I was a kid, my mom saw something on Oprah. She used to run Oprah during the day. And she saw something on Oprah, and somebody said, like, if your kids are mean to animals, they're probably going to go to jail. And my mom cried, and she was like, Ryan's definitely going to jail. She did. It really upset her bad, because it's funny, because I used to just do horrible things, you know, with firecrackers and experiments that kids sometimes do. Horrible things. And now it's like I'm almost an activist level, not as far down the road as Jonna, but close. Remember the limpy deer that we used to have that walked around out here? Jonna parks over there, and Luke was little, and Luke was going after that limpy deer, and Jonna got out, and she was like, you better not. But it's seriously, like, there's no reason to be mean to an animal. But this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do with this. Don't just read it for the law about not being mean to animals. Like, what are we supposed to really learn from these passages? That's the thing. So Deuteronomy 25 and verse 4. What do you got? Somebody, would you read that? You can see the passages up there if you want to go ahead and turn to one and read it.
You shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain.
Okay? I mean, that's an obvious example, because Paul uses that to apply to, let's just say, paying preachers. People who do spiritual work are allowed to be paid for it. And he uses this as a principle. But the principle is, if you got an ox out there and he's pulling this thing, don't put a muzzle on him and don't let him eat like he's working. Let him bend over and eat something while he works, is the concept. How about the second one? You shall not, well, I didn't give you the passages. Sorry about that. This is found 3 times in the Old Testament. Exodus 23 and verse 19. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. I'll give you a chance to comment on that, but I think if we read the other ones, it will help you articulate what's going on here. Don't boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Leviticus 22 and verses 27 and 28. You shall not kill an ox or sheep and her young in one day. Deuteronomy 22 and verses 6 and 7, you shall not take the mother with its young. That passage has to do with birds. And if you go up and you find a bird nest, and there's a bird sitting on either an egg or its babies, you don't just get to take the whole thing and eat it for dinner. You can have the bird or you can have the babies, but you can't have both. That's the Deuteronomy passage. So what principles are we taking from these strange animal laws?
There's value in life and creation.
Boy, that sends me down a path. Yeah, life. All life matters. Jonathan?
I think part of it too is this idea that, like, if you can be kind and compassionate towards an animal, you can be kind and compassionate towards any human.
Here's what one commentator says. This is a beautiful instance of the humanizing spirit of the Mosaic Law in checking a tendency to wanton destructiveness and encouraging a spirit of kind and compassionate tenderness to the tiniest of creatures. So don't just be a taker, consumer, but, you know, like, don't kill the mom and her baby on the same day. Katie, and then Dave.
Animals were given to eat, but just because you can do something doesn't mean you need to do it to an extreme.
that concept, look up the screen on that concept. Just because you can have the mom and baby birds for dinner doesn't mean you should. Just because you can and maybe legally have a right to exploit somebody from the collateral that they owe you doesn't mean that you should. The concept. Dave and then Maria.
I think of the idea of conservation, and then during the Industrial Revolution, just the manufacturing, trying to take and utilize everything from the land, and the images of just all the bison that have been destroyed or killed and then harvested in that way. And so there's this effort of need for conservation. And then along with the comment that was just made, the idea of caring for them in the sense of the genesis of God gave us dominion. How are we going to exercise this dominion? Are we just going to consume until there's nothing left, or are we going to be mindful as God's directing us?
Yeah. It's your conservation, the thing that we read. Checking a tendency to wanton destructiveness. I can, so I will. That's never the good guy. Like never the good guy. Maria?
It makes me think of that cliche, might doesn't make right, and it makes me think of, the Lord is the mightiest of all. And, what Dave was saying about dominion, he's given us dominion over these animals. And so, we could just do whatever we want with these animals, because for the most part, we're more powerful than they are because of that dominion factor. But, like God has exercised a ton of mercy over us and a ton of compassion over us. And so I just see it as a reflection of God wanting to say, okay, how are you going to treat this living creature, these living creatures that, are a step below the humans?
Yeah. The word that keeps coming to mind is shepherding.
Yeah.
Not oppressive dominion, but shepherding, as God is a shepherd. So let me move to these, because this is the main point. First main point of all. Becky told me I'm not allowed to read long quotes anymore. So here we go. Stop doing that. I can't read it in the moment anyway, so if you want the quote, then I'll give it to you later. Number one. First of all, how many times have you, remember your conservation comment? I'm going backwards. Your conservation comment, I want to put this in my notes. I need to remember to put this in my notes. I can't remember the passage, but somebody can Google it and find it real easy. God said, when you go in and you conquer the land and destroy everything, leave the trees alone. And he says, the trees didn't do anything to you. Those are my words. He says, they're not men. But the point is, just because you can go in and completely destroy everything doesn't mean that you should. Okay, so number one, have you ever heard people talk about God in the Old Testament is a mean and vengeful and spiteful God, and then you get to the New Testament and he's the God of mercy and salvation and love, and it's like, that's not true at all. Not even a little bit. The God of the Old Testament is that God who says, take care of those who can't take care of themselves, and it's something worth thinking about. But here's the big one. Deuteronomy chapter 10. This is kind of my key verse. It's not the only place where you could make this point, but I think the key verse is in verse 18. So this, starting in verse 12, the section is, now Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? What kind of a person does God want you to be, and what does he want you to do and not do? And so this whole list is about that stuff. And then you get into verse 14 where he starts to say, because it's rooted in the character and the nature of God himself. So verse 18, part of the character and nature of God, he executes justice for the fatherless and the widow and loves the sojourner, giving him food and clothes. And the idea is, if this is what God is like, then this is the kind of people that he wants us to be like. Merciful, just, gracious. I also have this passage listed next to that point. This is kind of my key. This is my key on this one. Romans 5 and verses 6 and 8. At the right time, Christ died for us when we were still sinners. We are the helpless, the ones who can't help ourselves. And so God sent Jesus to entirely give of himself for my sake. It's a picture of what he wants us to be. And then number 2, if you're still in Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 19, we've already mentioned this. Love the sojourner, therefore, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. And the idea here is, you didn't like it when people did it to you. Or you wouldn't like it if people did it to you. Or if you were helpless and needed help, you would really enjoy it if somebody stuck out their hand and helped you. And so treat others in the way that you want to be treated. It's the golden rule that belongs in this conversation too. I love baby noises. As my favorite, Becky and I agree with this, our favorite is when they sound like goats. When they do that. That's my very favorite of all. What else you got for me?
Going along with the golden rule, I think we're really quick to teach it to our kids, and we're really quick to shake our finger at other people. But this isn't written to say, take this information in so you can use it on other people like 2x4. It's take this to heart and use it in your daily life and understand where you are in this situation. And not everybody. I mean, yes, take care of everybody else, but you need to be the one doing it, not just telling people to do it.
Yeah. Practice what you preach.
I was thinking about the example God gave, or commandment to of God giving to when your brother needs support. And he does. The goal in the relationship is restoration. And that, again, is a characteristic of God, restorative.
Yeah.
Example.
So in that conversation, if his relative is able to redeem him, then you let it happen. Take the money, redeem him. It's like, no, you're working for me for the full time. No, let him be redeemed. Or even if he has a period of time that he has to work, no matter how long that time is, when the year of Jubilee comes along, he's free, and you're going to give him back his stuff. So restoration is the main point, not I'm going to get everything from you that I can and that you owe me. It's no, there's going to be some justice that happens here, but it's going to be heavily diluted with mercy. I think we're out of time, but I'll try to do this. When I see the kids, I'll stop. I'm going to go to Zechariah 7, and this is what I was saying with Dustin's point. Dustin's point is way hard. Like, if you mistreat the widows, then I'm going to make your wife a widow. But Zechariah chapter 7 and verses 8 through 14, is God talking about these things that we've been talking about? This stuff, Israel became not this. Israel became oppressors, and they lost their sense of mercy and grace towards other people. And in Zechariah 7, that is listed as one of the reasons why he sent them into captivity. If you're going to be in my land and you're not going to act like my people, guess what? You're not going to stay in my land. So verse 7, were not these the words that the Lord proclaimed by the former prophets when Jerusalem was inhabited and prosperous, with her cities around her, and the south and the lowland were inhabited? And the word of the Lord came to Zechariah, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, render true judgment, show kindness and mercy to one another. Do not oppress the widow, the fatherless, the sojourner, the poor, and let none of you devise evil against another in your heart. But they refused to pay attention and turned a stubborn shoulder and stopped their ears that they might not hear. They made their hearts diamond hard. I don't remember ever reading that before. I was reading that passage, I like, diamond hard hearts. Whatever, there it is. I like when I see things maybe for the first time. They made their hearts diamond hard, lest they should hear the law and the words that the Lord of hosts had sent by his Spirit through the former prophets. Therefore, great anger came from the Lord of hosts. As I called, and they would not hear, so they called, and I would not hear, says the Lord of hosts, and I scattered them with a whirlwind among the nations that they had not known. Thus the land was left desolate, so that no one went to and fro, and the pleasant land was made desolate. Okay. Rob's going to start 1 Thessalonians on next Sunday. Is that right? You have Sunday or Wednesdays?
I think I have Wednesday.
Okay, Kevin's starting the Sermon on the Mount. I would recommend reading Matthew 5 through 7 before class next Sunday. Matthew 5 through 7 before next Sunday, and Kevin's going to walk us through the Sermon on the Mount. Which, you're done. Go ahead and let it. But that Sermon on the Mount is going to flow really nicely with the law of Moses.